Today I'm going to be doing a short lesson on solving equations for AEP 859, Dr. Becking's class. First of all, in order to solve equations, we have to learn some very basic properties of equality. The first property of equality we have to learn is called the addition property of equality, which basically just says that if I have an equation, say A is equal to B, and I add the same item to both sides of the equation, the equation still remains true. This comes in handy in solving equations, such as this one right here, a minus 4 is equal to 7. Most people can look at that and say, well, the answer is 3 because, the answer is 11 because you can just look at that and figure it out. But using that property, that says if I add 4 to both sides of the equation, my positive 4 and negative 4 will cancel out. I'm going to be left with A is equal to 11. That's a very basic one-step equation using the addition property of equality, but that's a equation or that's a property that we need to learn how to use when we start solving more complicated equations. Next property that we're going to use is the subtraction property of equality, which is basically the exact same thing as the addition property of equality. If I have an equation A is equal to B, except I'm going to be subtracting the same value from both sides. And as long as I subtract the same value from both sides, and then the equation is still equal. And again, a very basic one-step equation used to solve this could be if I have x plus 7 equals 11, and I subtract 7 from both sides of the equation, I'm left with x is equal to 4. The third property that we're going to use is going to be the multiplication property of equality. And that property says if I have an equation, say A is equal to B, then if I take the same value times both sides of the equation, then the equation still remains true. A one-step equation for this would be if I have W divided by 4 is equal to 5. If I take 4 times both sides of the equation, my 4's here will cancel out. I'm going to be left with W is equal to 5 times 4, which would be 20. And the last property that we're going to learn today is called the division property of equality. And that basically says if I have an equation, A is equal to B, and I divide both sides of that equation by the same value, the equation is still true. And a one-step equation using that property, if I have 7t is equal to 56, and I divide both sides of that equation by 7, I'm left with t is equal to 8. Now these are all simple one-step equations, but these equations are examples of using those properties just one time. Next, we've got a couple examples of multiple step equations where we use the exact same properties to solve them. First off, when we solve equations, we have to make sure that we get all of our variables on one side of the equation and all of our numbers on the other side of the equation. Okay? So the first step we have to do is we have to get our numbers over here. I have to get rid of this positive 8. In order to get rid of a positive 8, I subtract 8. If I subtract 8 from this side, I subtract 8 from this side. That'll leave me with negative 5w on my left side of my equation. And negative 37 minus 8 is going to give me a negative 45. That's using my subtraction property of equality. Next, I need to use my division property of equality and divide both sides by negative 5. In doing so, my negative 5's will cancel. I'm going to be left with W is equal to negative 45 divided by negative 5, which would be a positive 9. Therefore, my answer is a positive 9. Now, I could always go in and substitute 9 in for W and check my answer. When I do that, I'm going to have 8 minus 5 times 9 is equal to negative 37. It's going to be 8 minus 45 is equal to negative 37. 8 minus 45 is negative 37, and therefore my answer checks. Another example of a two-step equation is if I have b divided by 3 minus 6 equals negative 2. My first step I have to use my addition property of equality now, because I need to get my negative 6 over to this side of the equation. So my first step would be to add 6 to both sides. Now when I do that, my negative 6 and positive 6 will cancel out. I'm going to be left with b divided by 3 is equal to 4. Now I have b divided by 3 here now, and in order to get rid of a divided by 3, I have to take it times 3. If I do it to one side, I do it to the other, and I'm left with b is equal to 12. Now again, I can check my answer. "12 divided by 3 minus 6 is equal to negative 2. Well, 12 divided by 3 is 4, minus 6 equals negative 2, and therefore my answer will check out. And the last thing I can use to solve equations is I can actually solve equations that have multiple steps. If I have a variable on both sides, I can use those same properties to solve those equations. The first thing I need to do is I need to make sure I get all of my variables, all my letters, on one side of the equation. In order to do that, I'm going to subtract 2m from both sides of the equation. That'll leave me with 12 is equal to m minus 31. At that point now I can add 31 to both sides and be left with 43 is equal to m. I could go in and I could check my answer. Take 43, plug it in for m in both spots. That'll give me 2 times 43 plus 12 is equal to 3 times 43 minus 31. 2 times 43 is 86, plus 12 is equal to 3 times 43, which is 129 minus 31. 86 plus 12 will give me a 98. 129 minus 31 is 98. Therefore, my answer checks. And one last problem. Again, I need to get all my variables on one side of the equation again. In doing so, I'm going to add 4n to both sides. And that's going to give me 8n minus 12 is equal to 12. And then I'm going to add 12 to both sides. And I will have 8n is equal to 24. Divide by 8 on both sides. I'm going to be left with n is equal to 3. If I check my answer, I'm going to have 4 times 3 minus 12 is equal to 12 minus 4 times 3. That's going to give me 12 minus 12 is equal to 12 minus 12. And so my answer is going to check out. I hope you're able to learn something with this short lesson on solving equations. And I think that's going to be it.